The mountain evening was quiet, too quiet for his liking. Snow crunched under the human's boots as he carried firewood back to his cabin. The tall trees around him stood like dark giants, and the cold wind whispered through their branches. He had lived in these mountains for years, and he knew the sounds of this place well. But tonight, something felt different. The forest was holding its breath, as if waiting. When he reached his wooden cabin, he pushed the door open slowly. The hinges gave a soft creak. Inside, the air was warm from the fire he had left burning earlier. It should have felt safe, but his heart tightened instead. His eyes scanned the small room. At first, everything looked normal. The table, the chairs, the tools on the wall. Then he noticed small things that were not right. One of his mugs was sitting on the table filled with water. He was sure he had left it empty in the sink. The rug near the door had been moved slightly, as if someone had stepped on it. And there, on the wooden floor near the window, he saw faint marks in the dust. Footprints. The man set down the wood quietly, his breath slow and heavy. He was not a man who scared easily. He had hunted in these woods, faced storms and wild animals. But the thought of someone, or something, inside his cabin made his blood run cold. He reached for the lantern on the table and lifted it high. The yellow light spilled into the corners of the room. He moved carefully, each step silent, his eyes sharp. The cabin was small with only one bedroom and a storage space, but shadows made the place feel larger, almost endless. Then he heard it. A faint sound. Breathing. Not his own. It was soft, almost hidden, but clear in the silence of the cabin. He froze, every muscle tight. The sound came from the corner near the stacked blankets. Slowly he stepped closer. The lantern's glow pushed back the shadows, revealing shapes, cloth, and wood. The breathing grew faster, as if the hidden one knew he was near. He crouched down and pulled the blanket aside. His eyes widened. There, pressed against the wall, was a figure. Not human. A young woman with skin as blue as the summer sky, glowing faintly in the firelight. Her long, pale hair spilled over her shoulders, and her wide, frightened eyes stared back at him. She looked weak, thin, and terrified. The alien woman pressed herself tighter into the corner, shaking her head quickly. Her lips moved, whispering words in a broken, frightened voice. "Please, don't hurt me." The man's grip tightened on the lantern. He had never seen anything like her before. Every story he had heard of strange beings in the mountains flashed through his mind. But here she was, real and trembling in his home. For a long moment, they just stared at each other. His heart beat hard, and her eyes shone with fear. He could see the way her hands shook, ready to run but too weak to move. The silent cabin was no longer silent. It was filled with the sound of two strangers, one human, one alien, both unsure what the other would do next. The man's breath clouded in the cold air of the cabin as he lowered the lantern slowly. His hands were steady, but his mind raced. The alien woman pressed herself tighter against the wall, her glowing blue skin shining faintly like moonlight on water. Her chest rose and fell quickly, every breath sharp with fear. For a moment, he thought she might scream, but instead, her lips trembled as she whispered again. Her voice was broken, almost fragile. "Please, don't hurt me." The man straightened, keeping his distance. He spoke in a calm tone, though his heart still pounded. "I won't harm you. You're safe here." But she didn't believe him. Her eyes darted around the cabin, searching for an escape. She tried to push herself to her feet, but her legs trembled and gave out beneath her. She collapsed back onto the floor, her body weak and trembling. The man set the lantern down on the table. He crouched near her, careful not to move too fast. "You can't stay on the floor. You'll freeze. Let me help you." She flinched as he reached out a hand. For her, humans were monsters told in stories. Hunters, killers, destroyers. She pulled back sharply, pressing herself into the corner. Her breath came in short gasps, her wide alien eyes filled with mistrust. He didn't force her. Instead, he stood and fetched a blanket from the bed. He placed it gently on the floor near her, then stepped back. The gesture made her pause. Her eyes flicked between him and the blanket. Slowly, with shaking fingers, she pulled the fabric around herself, still watching him as though he might strike at any second. "See," he said softly. "No harm, just warmth." Minutes passed in silence, only the sound of the fire cracking in the hearth filling the room. Finally, he asked, "What are you doing here?" Her eyes filled with fresh fear. She shook her head quickly. "Hunters," she whispered. Her voice cracked. "They chase me. I hide." The man frowned. Hunters? He knew these mountains well. No humans came this high, especially in winter. "Hunters? What kind of hunters?" he asked. She pressed her lips together, refusing to say more. Instead, her eyes glistened with tears. She looked so small, so lost, curled under the blanket. The man stood and poured a cup of water. He set it down on the floor near her. At first, she eyed it suspiciously, but thirst won the battle against fear. Her hand trembled as she reached out, lifting the cup to her lips. She drank greedily, water spilling down her chin. "You're weak," he said quietly. "You won't make it alone out there." Her gaze met his for the first time, steady and searching. For a moment he saw more than fear in her eyes. He saw pain, exhaustion, and a fragile spark of hope. Hope she didn't want to admit. But then, as the firelight flickered across her face, she whispered again, barely audible, "If you help me, they will hurt you too." The man's jaw tightened. He didn't understand who they were, but one thing was clear. This alien woman had brought danger with her, danger that now stood outside his cabin walls. And he had to decide, send her away or stand with her. The cabin's fire burned softly, filling the room with warm light, but the air between the human and the alien woman stayed cold. She sat curled in the blanket he had given her, her glowing blue skin shimmering faintly under the flicker of the flames. Every time the man moved, even to adjust the logs in the fire, she flinched as though expecting an attack. He tried to keep his voice calm, slow, without threat. "You're safe here. I told you that." Her wide eyes never left him. "Safe?" she repeated, the word heavy with doubt. "No safe. Anywhere." The man leaned back against the chair, his hands resting on his knees. He studied her carefully. She was young. He could see it in her delicate features, the way her eyes darted around the cabin like a trapped animal. Her body was thin, weak, as if she had been running for days without food. "You're hungry," he said quietly. "Let me fix something." She shook her head quickly, gripping the blanket tighter. "Food? Trap?" Her voice cracked. "You feed, then kill." The man sighed. "If I wanted to kill you, I wouldn't have given you the blanket. I wouldn't have given you water. Think about that." Her lips pressed into a thin line. She wanted to argue, but the truth of his words weighed on her. He stood and moved slowly to the small shelf where he kept supplies. He cut slices of bread and a bit of dried meat, placing them on a wooden plate. Then he set the plate on the floor near her and stepped back again. The woman's glowing eyes stayed locked on him. Minutes passed before she dared to lean forward and take the bread. She sniffed it first, then bit off a small piece. Her body trembled, but when the food touched her tongue, she couldn't resist. Hunger won. She ate quickly, tears slipping down her cheeks as she did. The man watched silently, arms crossed. He felt no anger, only pity. Whoever this alien woman was, she had suffered, yet enough to believe every kindness was a trick. When she finished, she wiped her mouth with the back of her hand. She whispered something he almost didn't catch. Why help me?" His answer was simple. "Because you needed help." She looked at him for the first time without flinching. Her eyes softened slightly, though fear still lingered. "No human help," she muttered. "Humans, dangerous." "Maybe some are," he admitted, "but not all." For the first time, silence between them didn't feel so heavy. The fire cracked, sending sparks upward. The woman pulled the blanket tighter, but she no longer pressed herself into the wall. Instead, she sat watching him, as though trying to decide if he spoke the truth. Then suddenly, a sound outside broke the moment, a sharp crack, like a branch snapping under weight. Both of them froze. Her eyes widened, filled with terror. "They found me," she whispered. The man reached for his rifle resting by the door. His jaw tightened and his voice dropped low. "Who's out there?" The alien woman shook her head, her body trembling. "Hunters," she said. "They come for me." The cabin's walls seemed thinner in that instant, as if the forest outside pressed close with danger. Inside, two strangers sat by the fire, one human, one alien, no longer enemies, but not yet friends. And outside, something moved closer. The cabin grew quiet again after the sound outside faded. The human stood near the door, rifle in hand, his body tense. The alien woman stayed wrapped in the blanket, her glowing skin trembling as if the fear inside her reached to her bones. For a long moment, neither spoke. The only sound was the fire snapping in the hearth. Finally, the man turned, his voice calm but firm. "You need to tell me what's happening. Who are these hunters? Why are they after you?" She shook her head quickly, her pale hair falling across her face. "You do not want to know. If you know, they will come for you too." His grip on the rifle tightened. "They're already near my cabin. I deserve the truth." Her eyes locked onto his, shining with tears and firelight. She breathed heavily, fighting between silence and confession. At last her voice broke through, quiet but sharp. "I was born to fight. My people train every child to hold a weapon before they can even walk. They tell us war is life, war is honor. But I—" She stopped, her throat tightening. "I refused." The man frowned. "Refused?" "I would not kill," she whispered. Her hand shook as she pulled the blanket tighter. "They called me a traitor. My own family turned their backs. Soldiers came. They dragged me through the camps, said I would be punished, or worse." She lowered her gaze. "I escaped." The man's chest grew heavy with her words. He had seen war in his own world, soldiers sent to fight battles they didn't choose. But this, an entire race that punished those who wanted peace. It made his stomach twist. She looked up again, her eyes filled with fear and shame. "They hunt me because I am weak to them. To them, I am not even alive anymore. I am a stain to be erased." Her voice cracked on the last word. She turned her face away, but the man saw the tears sliding down her cheeks. For a moment, he didn't know what to say. Truth in her words shook him, made the silence feel louder than thunder. He lowered the rifle slowly and set it against the wall. "You are not weak," he said finally. His voice was steady, carrying weight. "You had the strength to choose peace. That's harder than war." Her lips trembled, and for the first time she didn't look like she wanted to run. She studied him with eyes full of doubt and wonder. "You believe me?" "Yes," he said simply. The fire cracked again, sending sparks into the air. The human moved to the window, peering out into the dark forest. The trees stood still, but the silence was unnatural, heavy. He knew danger wasn't far. The alien woman's voice was softer now, almost breaking. "If they find me here, they will kill you too." The man turned, his face hard with decision. "Then they'll have to try." For a moment her fear eased. In its place was something new. Trust, fragile but real. She clutched the blanket, her breath unsteady, but she no longer looked at him as a threat. The night outside pressed closer, carrying unseen danger. But inside the cabin, something had shifted. A bond was forming, born from fear and truth. And both of them knew, soon, the hunters would come. The cabin stood in silence, but the forest outside was alive with secrets. The man pressed his hand against the cold wooden door, listening. The alien woman stayed wrapped in the blanket, her glowing skin dimmer now, as if she wished to vanish into the shadows. Then it came again, a soft crunch in the snow, far too heavy for a deer. Another sound followed, like metal brushing against wood. The man's jaw tightened. He knew the forest sounds, and these were not natural. He whispered without turning, "They're here." The woman's eyes widened, her breath catching in her throat. She pulled the blanket close as if it could shield her from what waited outside. "Hunters," she said, her voice thin as wind. "I told you." The man moved quickly, grabbing his old rifle. The wood was worn, the metal scratched, but it still fired true. He checked the chamber, then blew out the lantern to darken the cabin. The fire still burned low, painting the walls with a faint orange glow. Outside, faint voices carried through the cold, not human voices, deeper, harsher, each word heavy like stone. He couldn't understand the language, but the tone was enough. They were searching, calling to one another. The woman trembled. She leaned forward, clutching the edge of the chair. "If they find me, they will kill you first. They will not allow a human to hide me." The man glanced back at her, his eyes steady. "Then we make sure they don't find you." He pulled open the trap door hidden beneath the rug. It led to a small root cellar where he stored supplies. "Go," he whispered. She shook her head violently. "No, if they come, they will kill you. I cannot hide while you fight alone." Her voice surprised him. Only hours ago, she had been too afraid to even touch the food he gave. Now, despite her fear, she refused to abandon him. The man hesitated. He wanted her safe, but the truth was clear. If they were found, it would take both of them to survive. The voices outside grew louder. Shadows moved against the window, long and strange, cast by the moonlight. One shape bent low, sniffing the ground like a wolf on a trail. The woman's glowing eyes met his. She pushed the blanket aside, standing on shaking legs. Beneath the fabric of her strange clothing, he saw the outline of a bow strapped across her back. With trembling hands, she drew it free, pulling a single arrow tipped with silver light. "You can fight?" he asked, stunned. Her lips trembled, but she nodded. "I was trained. I just never wanted to use it." The man gave a sharp nod. "Then tonight, you use it to live." The sound of boots pressed against the snow outside the door. Heavy, close. The handle of the cabin door rattled once, testing. The man raised his rifle, steady and cold. The alien woman lifted her bow, her hands shaking but her eyes locked on the door. For the first time since he found her, they stood together. Not enemies, not strangers, but allies. And outside, the hunters closed in. The wooden door shuddered as something heavy struck against it. Dust fell from the rafters. The man pressed his rifle to his shoulder, steady but alert. Beside him, the alien woman gripped her bow, her glowing blue fingers trembling around the string. Her eyes darted toward him. "If they break in, we will not survive." The man gave a hard glance at her, calm but fierce. "Then we don't let them break in." Another strike slammed the door, louder this time. A sharp crack split the wood. Outside, guttural voices barked commands in their harsh alien tongue. Shadows moved across the windows like restless spirits. The woman's breathing was fast, shallow. Her training battled with her fear. She raised her bow, the arrow glowing faintly in the firelight. "I told myself I would never kill," she whispered. "But tonight, I must." The man nodded once. "Sometimes survival doesn't give us a choice." The door burst open, splinters flying across the room. A tall figure stepped inside, armored in black plates that shimmered in the firelight. Its eyes glowed red, scanning the cabin. Behind it, more shadows loomed. Without thinking, the alien woman loosed her arrow. It cut through the air, striking the invader in the chest. A sharp hiss filled the cabin as the creature staggered backward, collapsing into the snow outside. The man fired his rifle a heartbeat later. The crack echoed across the mountains as another shadow fell. Smoke curled from the barrel, the smell of gunpowder mixing with the icy air. Her hand shook, her breath ragged, but she didn't stop. Another arrow left her bow, piercing the shoulder of a second hunter. The creature roared in pain, stumbling into the wall. The human swung the rifle's butt against its head, knocking it down hard. For a moment, the cabin was chaos. Shouts, firelight, crashing wood. But through it all, the two of them moved together, not planned. Ned, not practiced, yet side by side. The man noticed her trembling after each shot, but her eyes burned with determination. She was no longer hiding in the corner. She was standing with him. When the last hunter fell silent outside, the cabin shook with the sound of retreat. Heavy boots crunched in the snow as the remaining shadows fled back into the forest. The night grew still again, though the silence now carried the weight of survival. The man lowered his rifle, breathing hard. Sweat mixed with the cold air on his skin. He turned to see her, bow still raised, hands shaking so badly she could barely hold the string. "It's over," he said quietly. "For now." Her bow lowered slowly, her whole body trembling. Tears shone in her glowing eyes as she looked at him. You fought for me." He nodded. "We fought together." Her lips trembled, and she whispered words that carried more weight than any arrow or bullet. "I trust you." The fire burned low, shadows dancing across the walls. For the first time since they met, her fear eased. She stood not as a frightened guest, but as someone who had found an ally. The night outside was still dangerous, but inside the cabin, trust had been born. The cabin smelled of smoke, gunpowder, and pine. The fire burned low, its glow stretching across the rough wooden walls. Outside, the snow lay heavy, broken only by the dark stains left where the hunters had fallen. The man reloaded his rifle slowly, his hands calm though his heart still beat hard from the fight. The alien woman sat near the fire, her bow resting across her knees. Her glowing blue skin shimmered faintly, the color brighter now than it had been when he first found her. But her body shook with exhaustion, and her hands trembled as she reached to warm them by the flames. For a long time they said nothing. The silence was not empty. It carried the weight of what had just happened, the fear, the struggle, and the choice they both made. Two strangers who, hours ago, had feared each other, had now fought side by side. Finally, the woman lifted her eyes to him. Her voice was soft, almost fragile. "You should have sent me away. You risked your life for me." The man leaned against the wall, his rifle across his lap. His eyes were steady. "I don't leave people to die, not out here, not anywhere." She studied him, her eyes wide and searching. "On my world, trust is a weakness. To trust is to fall. But you protect without asking anything." Her lips trembled and she whispered, "Why?" He gave a small, tired smile. "Because it's the right thing to do." Her breath caught at his words. Slowly, carefully, she reached out her hand. The movement was hesitant, uncertain, as if she feared he might pull away. But the man did not. He placed his rough hand in hers. Her skin was warm, glowing softly like light beneath water. In that moment, fear melted. The silence between them was no longer heavy. It was steady, strong. A silent bond, fragile yet unbreakable, had formed. But outside, the forest was not finished. Far in the distance, strange horns echoed across the snowy peaks, deep and haunting. The woman stiffened, her grip tightening on his hand. "More will come. They never stop." The man's eyes narrowed. He glanced at the door, then back to her. "Then we'll be ready." Her lips parted, surprise flickering in her eyes. For the first time she allowed herself to smile. Small, faint, but real. "Together," she whispered. The fire cracked, sending sparks upward, as if sealing their promise. That night the cabin became more than wood and stone. It became a shield, a place of fragile hope. Inside sat two souls who had every reason to distrust each other, yet had chosen to stand as one. The mountains outside stretched cold and merciless, the hunters still lurking in the shadows of the snow. But inside, by the firelight, a bond had been born, between human and alien, between fear and trust, between survival and something deeper. And though the night was not yet over, both knew one truth: they were no longer alone.